The November deluge hammered against the armored glass of Graham Alexander Whitaker's customized Mercedes S-Class. The expensive rain-sensing wipers couldn't keep pace with the storm as he tightened his grip on the leather-stitched steering wheel, his jaw aching from the sheer force of his frustration. Another quarterly board meeting had stretched mercilessly into the night, delaying his escape from the sterile canyons of the financial district, and now the notorious Boston evening traffic was less a crawl than a geological stagnation, crawling forward at an infuriating, agonizing pace. His phone, resting in the center console, vibrated with alarming regularity, a constant stream of high-stakes notifications from his development team concerning the Shanghai acquisition, a contract valued in the billions that demanded his constant, unrelenting attention. "Jenkins, reschedule tomorrow's morning meeting," he ordered, the deep resonance of his voice amplifying slightly within the acoustically sealed, leather-appointed interior via the car's Bluetooth system. "I need to review the Asian market projections thoroughly before we proceed with the valuation models." "Sir, Mrs. Whitaker, your mother, has already confirmed her attendance," his assistant replied, a familiar edge of apprehension detectable in his controlled tone. "She insists on discussing the Foundation's annual gala planning this week." Graham's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel, the irritation spiking into a sharp, familiar pain. Of course, his mother, Evelyn, the self-appointed queen of Boston society, would choose this precise, critical week to push her demanding social agenda. At 36, the CEO of Whitaker Global remained a pawn dancing to the precise, carefully orchestrated tune of his matriarch, a crushing reality that simultaneously infuriated and deeply exhausted him. The light finally turned a brilliant, impatient green, and Graham accelerated, perhaps a little too aggressively, compensating for lost time. His mind dangerously drifted back to the last time he'd actively defied his mother's wishes, 6 years ago, the ill-fated day he'd married Alara. The marriage had lasted barely 24 months before crumbling, suffocated beneath the suffocating weight of his mother's ceaseless disapproval and his own profound inability to stand his ground, to shield his wife. The memory still stung like a festering burn, a wound he had meticulously buried beneath layers of complex spreadsheets, hostile acquisitions, and record profits. The sickening, shrill screech of tires jerked him violently back to the present. A massive, unmarked delivery truck hydroplaned, suddenly swerving with terrifying speed into his lane. Graham's corporate-honed reflexes kicked in instantly. He yanked the wheel hard to the right, but the waterlogged asphalt of the wet road offered absolutely no traction. The world outside dissolved into a terrifying, dizzying blur of flashing headlights and sheets of rain before his luxury sedan slammed broadside into the concrete guardrail with a sickening, expensive crunch of crumpling metal. When the airbag finally deflated, smelling sharply of chemicals and dust, Graham found himself dazed, but fully conscious. A thin ribbon of warm blood trickled from a shallow laceration on his forehead, and his right arm throbbed with a dull, insistent ache. The accident hadn't been catastrophic, but the sheer force of the impact had been sufficient to deploy the complex safety systems and crumple the entire driver's side door panel inward. "Sir, are you all right?" A police officer, helmet dripping rainwater, appeared instantly at his shattered window, the powerful beam of his flashlight brutally cutting through the lingering rain and gloom. "An ambulance is already en route. You need to let them check you out." "I'm fine," Graham insisted, already reaching for his tie, despite the fact that the enclosed space of the car seemed to be spinning slightly on an unfamiliar axis. "I don't need, sir. It's standard protocol." The officer cut him off firmly. "With any impact severe enough to deploy the airbags, especially with a visible head injury, you must be evaluated." 20 minutes later, Graham sat in the fluorescent-lit, chaotic emergency room of Boston General Hospital, his tailored, expensive suit, an Italian wool masterpiece, now wrinkled, soaked, and spotted with rain and grime. A pragmatic-looking nurse drew blood efficiently from his uninjured left arm. His phone lay silent beside him. Jenkins had been given specific, preemptive instructions to handle the inevitable corporate crisis, and media spin his sudden, unexpected absence would surely cause back at Whitaker Global. "The doctor will be with you shortly," the nurse announced, expertly applying a sterile bandage to the small puncture mark on his arm. You're incredibly lucky it wasn't worse, Mr. Whitaker. Graham nodded absently, his mind already furiously cycling through tomorrow's stack of meetings. He needed to be discharged immediately. The corporate world did not cease its relentless spinning simply because of a minor traffic incident. I'll just need to check your vitals once more before. A child's desperately ragged, wet cough violently interrupted the nurse's practiced monologue, immediately followed by the frantic sound of running feet echoing down the tiled hallway. Room 3. We need a nebulizer stat. A familiar, sharp voice called out, laced with professional urgency, and Graham's heart seemed to seize completely within his chest. He knew that voice, had heard it whisper, "I love you," countless times in the soft dark of their bedroom, had heard it break, shattered, when she'd finally said goodbye 6 years ago. But it couldn't be. The curtain to his triage bay, a thin, institutional barrier, was violently pulled back by someone urgently reaching for a medical tray of supplies positioned on the back wall. And there she was, Alara Grace Monroe, his ex-wife. Her dark, glossy curls were wrenched back into a functional, messy bun, several rebellious strands escaping to softly frame a face that was taut with professional focus. She wore the standard-issue navy blue scrubs beneath a crisp white lab coat, a sleek stethoscope draped like a silver collar around her neck. She looked older, certainly, honed by years of responsibility, hardened by life, yet those warm, intelligent brown eyes were exactly, terrifyingly, as he remembered them. Those eyes, so often filled with laughter and concern, dilated instantly in sheer shock as they locked onto his. For one excruciating, infinite heartbeat, the emergency room's controlled chaos fell silent. Time ceased. "Era," he breathed out, the sound barely audible over the dull throb in his head. She recovered first, the muscle memory of her professional mask instantly sliding into place, even as he noticed the slightest, betraying tremor in her hands reaching for the oxygen masks. "Dr. Rodriguez needs me in pediatrics," she said quickly to the other nurse, her voice taut and rigidly controlled, devoid of warmth or recognition. "Can you finish the initial intake here?" Before Graham could articulate another coherent word, she was gone, executing a flawless professional retreat, leaving only the disorienting, lingering ghost of her presence and the faint, familiar scent of lavender, her unmistakable signature scent, clinging desperately to the sterile air. Graham sat immobilized, stunned. 6 years of carefully constructed emotional walls, built higher than any skyscraper he owned, crumbled in the instant she vanished. Memories flooded back with painful clarity. Their first date at that impossibly tiny, authentic Mexican restaurant in Cambridge where she'd laughed until she cried at his disastrous attempts to pronounce the menu items. Their wedding day, where she'd looked so utterly beautiful it physically hurt to look at her, even as his mother's cold, disapproving glare cast long, deep shadows over their fragile joy. The last devastating night, when she'd quietly packed her bags, and he had stood there, frozen, utterly unable to find the simple words that might have made her stay. The memory still tasted like ash. "Mr. Whitaker." A young doctor appeared, chart in hand. "Let's take a look at that head injury now." But Graham barely registered the doctor's presence. His mind was racing, grappling with the impossible reality. Era worked here. All this time, 6 years, she had been right here in Boston. He had blindly assumed, or perhaps deliberately convinced himself, that she'd moved back to her small, distant family home in Arizona immediately after the divorce. He had never checked. He had deliberately avoided knowing, because knowing meant feeling, and feeling was the ultimate danger in his carefully defined world of corporate takeovers, leveraged buyouts, and power plays. The examination passed in a blur of detached professionalism. A minor concussion, a sprained wrist, a mandatory follow-up appointment in a week. Graham nodded mechanically, signing the discharge papers without truly looking at them, but his entire focus remained fixed on Era. As he waited for his driver to arrive, the damaged Mercedes had already been towed away. He heard it again, that terrible, wheezing, desperate cough. It emanated from behind a curtain partition slightly farther down the hall, followed immediately by a child's frightened whimper and Alara's soft, infinitely soothing voice. "It's okay. Baby? She was saying, the sound of her tenderness like a physical blow. Mommy's right here. Just breathe with me, nice and slow. Mommy. Graham's world tilted completely on its axis. Mrs. Monroe, another voice, a nurse's, said professionally. Noah's fever is still climbing. Dr. Rodriguez recommends we admit him overnight for observation. Noah. The name hit Graham with the force of another severe car crash. He found himself moving closer, drawn by an inexplicable, gravitational force he couldn't resist. Through a slight accidental gap in the curtain, he caught a quick glimpse of a small, fragile figure nestled in a hospital bed. The child couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old, with wavy brown hair and a thin, pale face pinched with acute discomfort. Then the boy opened his eyes, and Graham's heart stopped for the second, definitive time that night. He knew those eyes. He saw them every single morning in the polished surface of his mirror. The same unusual, penetrating blue-gray shade, a rare, distinctive color that had marked the Whitaker family line for generations. The devastating realization hit him with the force of a physical blow to the solar plexus. The timing of the divorce, the specific color of those eyes, the sheer panic with which Alara had fled his presence moments earlier. This was why she'd left Boston without looking back, why she had severed all ties so completely, choosing silence over honesty. She'd been pregnant. He had a son. The carefully ordered world Graham had constructed, with its 25th floor corner office views, its power lunches, its meticulously managed emotions and controlled, guaranteed outcomes, shattered around him like safety glass. Nothing in his Harvard MBA training had prepared him for the raw, brutal reality of this moment. In the distance, he heard his name being called. His driver had undoubtedly arrived, but Graham couldn't move. He stood there, completely frozen, as the truth savagely rewrote everything he thought he knew about the last 6 years of his life. A small, feverish hand reached out for Era, and she gathered the boy, Noah, close, murmuring soft, unintelligible words of comfort into his hair. The gesture was so tender, so natural, so intimately maternal, that it made Graham's chest ache with a profound, agonizing emptiness. This was what he had missed. This was what his crushing pride and fundamental weakness had ultimately cost him. Finally, he forced his body to turn away. He couldn't confront this explosive truth now. Not here. Not in this way. But as he walked toward the exit on unsteady, trembling legs, Graham Alexander Whitaker knew with absolute, chilling certainty that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. His perfectly ordered world had just collided head-on with the devastating ghost of his greatest regret. And in the wreckage lay a truth that would force him to finally face everything he'd spent 6 years aggressively running from. His failures, his fears, and the persistent, unshakable love he'd never truly stopped feeling for the woman who'd once believed in him enough to say, "I do." Era's hands shook uncontrollably as she charted Noah's latest vital signs onto his digital profile. The pediatric ward's dim, emergency night lighting couldn't hide the frantic tremors in her fingers as she attempted to write, nor could the quiet, rhythmic beeping of the bedside monitors mask the frantic, painful thundering of her own heart. Graham was here. After 6 years of painstakingly constructed distance, the carefully maintained, separate walls between their worlds had crumbled violently in an instant. "Mommy." Noah's voice was raspy, weakened from his latest, severe asthma attack. "Can you stay?" She turned to her son, forcing a calming, professional smile onto her face. "Of course, baby. Let me just finish these charts." Moving to his bedside, she gently smoothed his wavy brown hair so much like her own, while those eyes, those shocking blue-gray eyes that haunted her deepest dreams, were all undeniably his father's. Noah caught her hand in his small, warm one. Even burning with fever, he remained unusually perceptive, acutely sensing her distress. "You look scared," he whispered, his little face drawn. "I'm just worried about you getting better," she deflected smoothly, pressing a light, lingering kiss to his too warm forehead. "Try to sleep, okay?" Once Noah's breathing finally evened out into the familiar, steady rhythm of sleep, Era slipped silently into the hallway. She made it to the staff break room, a small, windowless sanctuary, before her carefully constructed composure finally shattered. Sliding down the sterile wall until she was seated on the floor, she pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. Pick up, she muttered fiercely as the line rang, each tone sounding impossibly loud in the quiet ward. Do you know what time it is? Her best friend Lucia's voice was thick, hazy with interrupted sleep. He's here. Era whispered the words, the sound barely a breath. Graham. He saw Noah. There was a sharp, audible intake of breath on the other end. Then the rustling of sheets as Lucia presumably bolted upright in bed. What? How? Car accident. Era choked out, her voice cracking uncontrollably. Minor, but... Lucia, you should have seen his face when he realized. I don't know what to do. First, breathe, Lucia commanded, her voice immediately switching to crisis mode. Is Noah okay? Fever's still high. Dr. Rodriguez wants to keep him overnight for observation. Era pressing her free hand against her eyes, trying to staunch the welling tears. What if Graham tries to take him away? His family has so much money, so many connections. Evelyn will never let him. Stop, Lucia cut in firmly. You are catastrophizing. Graham might have been weak when it came to his mother, heartbreakingly so, but he was never cruel. Besides, you have rights. Ironclad rights. You've been Noah's only parent for 5 years. 6, Era corrected automatically, the professional nurse momentarily overriding the panicked woman. I was already pregnant when... She couldn't finish the painful sentence. When he chose his mother's approval over you, Lucia completed softly, the memory rising unbidden between them. Era's mind conjured the image. Graham's mother, Evelyn Whitaker, resplendent and poisonous in her custom designer suit, cornering Era in the powder room during a charity gala. Dear, she'd said, her voice dripping with artificial concern, every syllable laced with patronizing superiority. You must see how this arrangement isn't working. Graham needs a partner who understands our world, our complex obligations. You're simply making him choose between 2 incompatible lives, and that's profoundly unfair to him. A week later, when Graham had once again canceled their anniversary dinner for a supposed urgent meeting his mother had conveniently arranged, Era had packed her bags. She'd been planning to tell him about the baby that night. Instead, she'd watched him stand there, silent and torn, the corporate armor already too heavy to allow him to fight for her. A sudden noise in the hallway snapped Era violently back to the present. I have to go, she whispered to Lucia. My shift isn't over. Call me tomorrow, Lucia insisted fiercely. And Era, remember who you are. You've raised an amazing kid completely on your own. Don't let anyone, especially a Whitaker, make you feel small. After hanging up, Era splashed cold water onto her face in the small utility sink and straightened her scrubs. Professional, controlled. She could do this. But when she stepped back into the quiet hallway, her carefully rebuilt resolve was immediately tested. Graham stood there, still in his expensive suit, though it was now rumpled and clearly strained from the accident. A stark white bandage stood out vividly against his left temple. You should have told me. His voice was low, intense, vibrating with repressed emotion. Era glanced around quickly, intensely grateful the immediate hallway was empty of staff and visitors. You need to leave, she said quietly, maintaining eye contact. Visiting hours are over. A son, Alara. Graham's composure finally cracked, revealing the raw, genuine pain beneath the surface. I have a son I knew absolutely nothing about for 6 years. 5 years and 4 months, she corrected automatically, unable to help herself. And yes, you do. His name is Noah Sebastian Monroe Whitaker. He's in kindergarten. He loves dinosaurs and outer space, and he has severe, persistent asthma that keeps landing him in this hospital. Graham flinched visibly at the sharp bitterness lacing her tone. Monroe Whitaker. I never denied his heritage. Era crossed her arms tightly over her chest. I just protected him from it. Protected him? Graham took a deliberate step closer, his formidable height forcing her to crane her neck slightly to look up at him. Or punished me? Punished you? Era's laugh was brittle and hollow, laced with disbelief. You actually think this was about you? I was 28, pregnant, and had just watched my husband choose his mother's approval over our entire marriage. What, precisely, would you have done? I would have wanted to know, he countered, the words thick with regret. Lower your voice, Era hissed, glancing nervously toward Noah's darkened room. He's finally sleeping. Graham ran a frustrated hand through his dark, perfectly styled hair, a gesture so devastatingly familiar it made her heart ache anew. I have rights, Era. Legal rights you never knew to exercise, because I never filed for child support or made any claims against your family, Era pointed out ruthlessly. I didn't want anything from you or your family. I still don't. But Noah might, Graham countered, his voice steady now. He deserves to know his father. The words hit her like a physical blow, because this had always been her greatest, most terrifying fear. That she'd made the fundamentally wrong choice. That her fierce, overwhelming desire to shield Noah from the toxic dynamics of the Whitaker family had ultimately deprived him of something vital, something necessary for his identity. He's not a business acquisition, she said finally, her voice weary. You can't just walk in and take over. I know that. Graham's voice softened slightly, a glimpse of the man she had loved returning. But I can't walk away either. Not now. Not ever again. A monitor alarm beeped insistently from down the hall, and Era straightened immediately, snapping back into her nursing role. I have to go. My patients need me. Era, wait. Graham reached out reflexively for her arm, but stopped agonizingly short of actually touching her. Have dinner with me tomorrow. We need to talk about this properly, maturely. I don't date patients, Mr. Whitaker, she said coolly, forcing distance between them. I'm not asking for a date, he refuted quickly. I'm asking for a chance to understand my son's life. 5 years of it. He pulled out a thick business card and held it out, letting her decide whether to take it. Please. Era stared at the card. Thick, cream-colored cardstock, embossed silver lettering. The weight of immense power and overwhelming privilege condensed into paper form. Everything she'd walked away from 6 years ago. Fine, she said, finally taking the card, feeling its cold slickness. But not tomorrow. Noah needs to be fully recovered and settled first. I'll call you. Graham nodded, and for a fleeting moment, she saw a raw, exposed flash of the man she'd initially fallen in love with, the one who existed somewhere beneath the corporate armor and his mother's crippling expectations. Then he straightened, the CEO mask falling back perfectly into place. I'll wait, he said simply, his resolve hardening. But not forever. Era watched him walk away, his slightly unsteady gait the only sign of his earlier collision. Once he finally disappeared around the far corner of the corridor, she leaned heavily against the cool, painted wall, pressing her hand against her chest where her heart beat a painful, irregular rhythm. In Noah's room, the monitors beeped steadily, marking the steady rhythm of her son's breathing. She moved back to his bedside, studying his sleeping face under the dim light. He looked so much like Graham when he slept, the same serious set to his mouth, the same unervingly long, dark eyelashes. I'm sorry, baby, she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure exactly what she was apologizing for. Keeping him from his father, for not being brave enough to fight harder 6 years ago, for the devastating storm she knew was now inevitably coming. Noah stirred slightly, mumbling something vague about rockets and the moon in his sleep. Era managed a small, genuine smile despite her inner turmoil. Her son, their son, was the absolute best combination of both of them. Graham's fierce determination, her own deep compassion, their shared, unbounded curiosity about the world. Maybe that was why she'd given him the Whitaker name, even if only as a hyphenated suffix. Some secret, hopeful part of her had always known this difficult day would eventually come, had perhaps even secretly hoped for it in the quietest corners of her heart, where first, true love never truly died. The long night stretched ahead, full of terrifying uncertainty. But as she settled into the uncomfortable chair beside Noah's bed, Era made herself a powerful promise. Whatever happened next, whatever Graham's startling reappearance meant for their carefully ordered, quiet life, she would face it with the same quiet strength that had carried her through the last 6 arduous years. After all, she wasn't just Alara Grace Monroe anymore. She was Noah's mother, and that identity made her stronger than any fear, any regret, or any lingering echo of the love she'd never quite managed to forget. Graham sat motionless in his expansive home office, staring blankly at the Boston skyline through the floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows. Dawn was now painting the glass towers in shades of soft pink and shimmering gold, but he hadn't slept a single minute. Instead, he'd spent the entire night diving into a furious digital rabbit hole, searching for every trace of the life he should have known about. His laptop displayed the website for Brighton Elementary. Noah's kindergarten class had recently won the annual science fair with their ambitious project about the solar system. In the grainy group photo, Graham spotted him immediately, a small, serious figure in a NASA t-shirt, proudly holding a wobbly model of Jupiter, his son. The words still felt foreign, shocking, yet miraculously true. A precise, soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Whitaker. Jenkins entered the room, looking professionally concerned and impeccably dressed. The board is expecting you in the main conference room in 30 minutes. Sir, should I have them reschedule the Q2 strategy session? Graham checked his reflection quickly in the polished window glass. The small cut on his temple was barely visible now, expertly covered by the ER bandage, but deep, heavy dark circles shadowed his blue-gray eyes. No, he said firmly, pushing the laptop aside. But clear my entire afternoon schedule completely. And Jenkins, I need you to discreetly find me the most formidable, best family lawyer in Boston. Immediately. Sir. Jenkins hesitated, visibly uncomfortable with the request. Your mother called 3 times while you were driving back. She's quite insistent about discussing the gala's seating chart. Not now. Graham's tone left absolutely no room for negotiation or argument. For the first time in his entire adult life, his mother's relentless demands seemed utterly insignificant, distant, and meaningless. The morning passed in a chaotic blur of meetings and urgent conference calls. Graham moved through them on pure autopilot, his mind constantly drifting back to the hospital, to Noah's fevered, small face, to Era's fiercely defensive stance as she protected their child from him. By noon, he couldn't take the suffocating confinement of the office anymore. He left the building without explanation, ignoring his scheduled lunch, and drove himself straight to Brighton Elementary. The school was a cheerful, welcoming brick building, brightly adorned with colorful children's artwork decorating the large windows. Graham parked across the street, attempting to appear casual as he watched the kids shrieking and playing during recess. Can I help you? A burly security guard approached his car, his expression suspicious. Graham rolled down his window, adopting his most professional, disarming demeanor. I'm looking for information about enrollment procedures for next year, officer. The main office is around the corner, sir, the guard replied, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at the expensive car. We can't have people watching the playground, sir. I'm sure you understand. Graham did understand, and the realization hit him hard, sharp and painful. He was a stranger here, a dangerous-looking stranger to the innocent, small world of his own son. Back inside his car, he pulled out his phone and opened the Boston General Hospital website. Era's professional profile was there, Alara Monroe, RN, BSN, head nurse, pediatric unit. The small photo showed her in clean scrubs, smiling warmly and confidently at the camera. She looked poised, accomplished, and completely self-possessed. A terrifyingly far cry from the young, tentative woman his mother had once cruelly dismissed as unsuitable. His phone buzzed sharply. An incoming call from Mother. Graham immediately declined it, something he'd never once dared to do before. Instead, he pulled up the collection of photos he'd downloaded from Brighton Elementary's public gallery. Science fairs, chaotic field trips, holiday concerts, 5 years of memories he should have been an inherent, central part of. The sound of children's laughter drew his attention back to the playground. A group of boys Noah's age were playing with toy rockets, their boundless excitement visible even from this distance. Did Noah play like that when he wasn't sick? Did he have many friends? What did his voice truly sound like when it wasn't hoarse from coughing? Graham started the car suddenly, unable to bear being a silent, observing stranger in his son's life for one more minute. He drove straight to Boston General, parking hastily in the visitor's lot. The pediatric floor was significantly quieter now than it had been the night before, sunlight streaming gently through the large windows. He found Noah's room easily, room 3, but stopped sharply in the doorway. The hospital bed was empty, stripped, and freshly made. A nurse was already removing the monitoring equipment from the wall. "Excuse me," Graham's voice cracked slightly, betraying his deep panic. "The patient who was here, Noah Monroe Whitaker. Discharged about an hour ago," the nurse replied efficiently. "His fever broke completely this morning, and Dr. Rodriguez cleared him to go home." Home? Another place Graham had never been. "Mr. Whitaker, Dr. Rodriguez appeared quietly behind him, a middle-aged man with kind, tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I thought I might see you here." Graham turned, surprised. "You know who I am." "I've been Noah's pediatrician since he was born," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly, folding his arms. "And I knew Alara 6 years ago, when she first came to work here." He didn't elaborate. "She never said a word, but—" He gestured to his own eyes, then mimed looking at a baby. "Some things are quite difficult to miss." Graham swallowed hard, the muscles in his throat tight. "His asthma, how serious is it?" "Manageable with proper medication and vigilant monitoring," the doctor confirmed, "and care which he receives. Era is an exceptional mother." Dr. Rodriguez's voice, though measured, carried a subtle, professional warning. A guardrail set up instantly for his patient. "She has provided that boy with everything he could possibly need." "Almost everything," Graham heard himself murmur, the realization hitting him with the force of an actual impact. Dr. Rodriguez allowed himself a long, assessing look at the corporate titan standing before him, the silence stretching taut. "Noah's next routine checkup is scheduled in 2 weeks. Specifically, Tuesday the 15th at 2 p.m. He didn't just state the time. He held Graham's gaze, a knowing, almost challenging intensity in his eyes. "Just in case you were wondering," Graham acknowledged, a sharp nod confirming he recognized the precise value of that unsolicited piece of information. It was a lifeline, a calculated risk taken on behalf of the child. "Thank you." Settling back into the leather seat of his sedan, the scent of expensive upholstery clashing with the residual sterile smell of the hospital, he finally played his mother's accrued voicemail. Evelyn Whitaker's voice, precisely modulated, cultured, and utterly detached from genuine human messiness, filled the confined space, droning on about intricate seating charts for some upcoming social imperative and the eternal burden of philanthropic obligations. Halfway through the discussion of the suitable centerpiece height for the winter charity gala, Graham abruptly cut the message short. He then executed a maneuver entirely foreign to his rigidly scheduled life. He drove directly to his mother's Beacon Hill residence, the venerable brick structure standing as an edifice to old money and stringent control, without announcing his arrival. Jenkins, the longtime housekeeper, visibly flinched at the sight of him appearing unannounced in the entryway, the sheer breach of protocol alarming her. She recovered quickly, guiding him toward the conservatory. Evelyn sat enshrined in her preferred velvet armchair. A formidable stack of heavy cardstock gala invitations fanned out on a low antique table before her. She looked up as her son entered, her spine perfectly vertical, her silver hair faultlessly coiled, her immaculate appearance impervious to the passage of time or the shock of unexpected visits. "Darling," Evelyn began, the practiced displeasure in her tone immediate. "I've been attempting to reach you for hours. These RSVPs simply will not suffice for the—" "I saw Era last night," Graham sliced through her complaint. His mother's hand, poised over a gilt-edged card, froze mid-air. "I wasn't aware she was still residing in Boston." "She is," She's a pediatric nurse at Boston General. Graham closed the distance between them, standing over her, deliberately blocking the sunlight that filtered through the glass roof. She was the one attending to me after my accident. Yes, Jenkins noted you had a minor vehicular indiscretion, Evelyn said, returning to her papers dismissively. Really, darling, you must be more prudent with your... I have a son. The 4 quiet words dropped into the conservatory's polished silence like heavy stones into placid water, shattering the practiced calm. Evelyn's composure fractured only marginally. Her face became unnervingly immobile, betrayed solely by a minute clenching at the corners of her perfectly lined eyes. I see, she stated at last, her voice barely audible. Did you know? Graham's inquiry was dangerously low, stripped bare of emotion. When she left, did you know she was carrying my child? And would it have altered the outcome? Evelyn finally conceded the pen to the table. You were completely unprepared for parenthood then. You were just on the cusp of demonstrating genuine, tangible promise in the corporate arena. A child, especially with her, would have utterly sabotaged everything we had diligently cultivated. Everything you had cultivated, Graham corrected, the correction a sharp, surgical incision. My son is 5 years old, mother. He suffers from asthma. He is passionately obsessed with space and dinosaurs. He has been hospitalized multiple times over the years. And I never knew. 5 years, and I never knew. Graham. His mother's voice adopted that familiar, maddeningly reasonable cadence, the tone she used when attempting to enforce control. Irrespective of whatever emotional scenario you are constructing, you must recall your responsibilities. The company, the board you're standing. His name is Noah Sebastian, Graham interjected, cutting her off decisively. And he has my eyes. Evelyn visibly recoiled. A minute, sharp flinch. The distinctive shade of blue-gray Whitaker eyes was a hallmark, a legendary physical marker within their insulated social sphere. A clear indicator of lineage and breeding that his mother had always exploited and been profoundly proud of. What precisely do you expect from me? She finally demanded, the composure returning as aggression. Nothing, Graham declared, standing to his full, commanding height. For the first time in my entire existence, absolutely nothing. I am not here seeking your endorsement or your counsel. I am here to inform you that the established order is finished. Things are changing. You cannot possibly be contemplating appending your established life for this disruption for this boy. Graham's voice whipped across the opulent room, sharp and unforgiving. He is my son. And Era did exactly what you compelled her to do 6 years ago. She protected him from us. From this. He swept an arm around the flawlessly decorated room, the silent accusation encompassing the expensive velvet and the gilded fixtures. From the subtle poison of perpetual scrutiny, of constantly being judged and inevitably being found lacking. I acted only in your best interests, Evelyn insisted, her voice rising slightly. No, Graham asserted. He felt a profound internal rupture, something heavy and ancient giving way in his chest. A symbolic chain he had carried for so long he had ceased to feel its oppressive weight had finally snapped. You acted solely in your best interests, but that tyranny ceases immediately. He pivoted toward the door, then paused, his hand resting on the polished brass knob. The gala committee will require a new chairman. I will be fully occupied learning how to be a father. His mother called out his name, a desperate, fading sound, but Graham continued his march. Graham walked out of the suffocating opulence of the house, descending the meticulously manicured granite steps and stepping directly into the bright, cleansing afternoon sunlight. His phone vibrated instantly with a simple text message. Unknown number. Asterisk Noah's feeling better. We should talk. Dinner tomorrow. Asterisk his hands, steady through high-stakes negotiations, trembled slightly as he manually saved Era's contact information. For the first time since the night of the accident, he felt an actual release in his chest. He could draw a full, unlabored breath. He composed his reply immediately. Asterisk name the time and place. I'll be there. He then proceeded to do the second unprecedented thing that day. He instructed Jenkins to cancel every single scheduled meeting for the following 24 hours. Regardless of the outcome of the dinner with Era, he knew inherently that this confrontation would be the most critically important meeting of his life. Because across the city, a small boy with Graham's eyes was recovering. A boy who found wonder in space and dinosaurs. A boy who deserved to be far more than a secret, a source of shame, or a corporate disruption. A boy who fundamentally deserved a father. Era stood before her full-length bedroom mirror, critically assessing her reflection and questioning the suitability of her chosen ensemble for the third time. The dress, a tailored navy blue sheath, was certainly professional enough for a serious, high-stakes discussion, yet elegant enough for the specific upscale restaurant Graham had suggested. She wore her naturally dark curls loose tonight, allowing them to frame her face, much as they had years ago when, she sternly commanded herself, refusing to descend that mental path. Lucia, I honestly don't know about this, she muttered into her phone, which rested on her dresser, speakerphone active. Perhaps we should meet somewhere less formal, less charged. The restaurant is flawless. Lucia's pragmatic voice crackled slightly through the speaker. Neutral ground. Public enough to mandate civility, but private enough to permit actual conversation. Besides, you look phenomenal in that dress. How did you? Because I know you, Era, and I know that's the dress you wear when you require armor. There was a small, meaningful pause on the line. How is Noah? Era glanced toward her son's room, where she could hear the happy, low chatter of Noah and his babysitter, Carmen. Better. The new regimen Dr. Rodriguez prescribed seems highly effective. She sighed, adjusting a curl that fell across her forehead. He's been asking hard questions, though, about Graham, about why the man from the hospital stared at him so strangely. He's too perceptive for his own good sometimes. Like his mother, Lucia noted softly. Are you truly ready for the weight of this? Before Era could formulate a proper response to Lucia, Noah materialized silently in her doorway, clutching his battered Tyrannosaurus Rex plush toy, his favorite companion. Mommy, he announced gravely, you look pretty tonight. Thank you, baby. Era immediately knelt, bringing herself down to his eye level, automatically smoothing the fabric of his slightly wrinkled t-shirt. Do you remember what we discussed? Mommy has a very important work dinner, but Carmen will prepare your favorite spaghetti and watch the new space documentary with you. Noah recited the planned schedule perfectly. His blue-gray eyes, the exact, unmistakable shade of Graham's, studied her face with unnerving focus. Is it with the man from the hospital? Era's heart tightened instantly, a painful, sharp clench. Yes, honey. He is someone Mommy knew a long time ago. We need to discuss some adult matters tonight. Noah nodded, accepting the boundary with striking solemnity. Is he the reason you look worried? I am not worried, Era stated, injecting a false lightness into her tone as she stroked his hair back from his forehead. I just want to ensure you have maximum fun with Carmen. Okay. Following a final, lingering hug and multiple reassurances exchanged with both Noah and Carmen, Era finally found herself behind the wheel, navigating the busy downtown traffic. The restaurant Graham had reserved was deep in the financial district, a place called Layman Azza, the Blue Magnet, the very place they had celebrated their first anniversary 6 years prior. The profound, deliberate significance of that choice did not escape her. Graham was not just scheduling a meeting. He was attempting to draw an emotional connection. Graham was already present when she entered the elegant foyer, waiting just inside the imposing glass entrance. He was clad in a charcoal gray suit whose impeccable tailoring and fabric quality easily exceeded her total monthly income, yet his customary corporate veneer was compromised by the rigid, almost painful tension visible in the set of his shoulders. You look beautiful, he said quietly as she approached, his gaze unwavering. This is not a date, she reminded him sharply, deliberately ignoring the traitorous skip her pulse performed at the unsolicited compliment. No, Graham agreed, the soft light of the restaurant reflecting in his eyes. It is infinitely more important than that. The maitre d' escorted them to a discreet corner booth, partially shielded from the main dining area by elaborate decorative screens. Graham requested a specific bottle of wine, the same rare Bordeaux vintage they had shared precisely 6 years ago. Era noted the order, a fresh wave of resentment rising, and firmly requested only sparkling water. "I'm on call tonight," she explained tersely. "The hospital needs seamless backup coverage." "Always tending to everyone else," Graham murmured, a low, reflective statement. "Some things clearly have not changed." "A lot of things have changed," Era countered, meeting his gaze with unyielding firmness. They placed their dinner orders. The interim silence was intense, thick with 6 years of unaddressed history. As soon as the waiter retreated, Graham retrieved a slim, expensive leather portfolio and carefully placed it between them on the crisp white linen. "What is that?" Era asked, even though the cold certainty of what it contained had already settled heavily in her stomach. "Information compiled by my legal counsel regarding father's rights in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts." He lifted a cautionary hand when she started to protest vehemently. "I am not, at this moment, threatening litigation, Era. I simply required a factual, legal understanding of precisely where we stand." "Where we stand?" Era let out a short, harsh laugh, devoid of humor. "We stand exactly where you deliberately abandoned us 6 years ago, Graham. Except now, there is a 5-year-old child involved who does not need his stable world violently overturned because you suddenly experienced an acute sensation of guilt." "This isn't fueled by guilt," Graham insisted, his voice sounding raw and stripped bare. "This is rooted in my son. Our son, who inherited my eyes and your smile, and who loves the cosmos so deeply that he insisted on wearing a NASA patch shirt to his school science fair." Era's hand trembled slightly as she finally reached for her water glass. "You've been deliberately tracking him." "Of course I have," he confirmed, the admission unapologetic. "I have lost 5 years of his existence. I am attempting, frantically, to bridge that gap." He leaned forward urgently. "Tell me about him, please." That single word broke her meticulously maintained composure. Graham Alexander Whitaker never said please to anyone, unless he was speaking the deepest, most desperate truth of his heart. "He's brilliant," she heard herself confessing, the words tumbling out. "Sometimes too astute. He demands explanations for everything. Just last week, he insisted on knowing the exact scientific reason why the sky appears darker in space than on Earth. He was not remotely satisfied until we cross-referenced multiple advanced explanations." Graham's resulting smile was etched with a profound, almost painful pride. "He gets that boundless curiosity from you. He also inherited quite a lot from you," Era admitted honestly. "The way he furrows his brow in deep concentration, that inherent need he has to understand the why behind every mechanism, his pure, unyielding determination. When he decided he needed to master the constellations, he required me to read college-level astronomy texts every single night for a month. I want to genuinely know him," Graham said softly, the desire palpable. "I need to be an active, integral part of his life." "It is not that simple," Era stated, setting her glass down decisively. "You maintain an entirely separate existence, Graham. Corporate board meetings, mandated social obligations, the endless machinations of your mother." "I told her," he cut in, his eyes blazing with fierce resolution. "I told my mother about Noah yesterday." Era felt the heat drain entirely from her face. "You did what?" She had to comprehend that the rules are being irrevocably rewritten. "I am fundamentally changing." His hand moved slowly across the tabletop, stopping a scant inch from hers, a gap that spoke volumes about the distance still between them. "I spent 6 years attempting to fulfill the role of the son she demanded, the CEO everyone anticipated. But the instant I saw Noah, I understood that none of that holds any meaning compared to being the devoted father he actually deserves." "Those are attractive words," Era conceded, though her voice vibrated with residual shock. "But what happens when your mother inevitably begins to maneuver?" When she decides Noah needs entrance into specific elite schools, or demands he socialize with the right people. When she looks at him and views only another generation to be ruthlessly molded into her definition of perfection. She won't. Graham's voice hardened into steel. Because this time I will not permit it. Like you courageously refused to permit her interference 6 years ago. The unspoken accusation, heavy with their shared historical pain, hung intensely between them. Their entrees arrived, forcing a brief, awkward silence as the waiter attempted to maneuver dishes past the tension. I was entirely wrong, Graham finally stated, pushing his barely touched food aside. I was a coward who permitted my mother to dictate the entire course of my life simply because challenging her felt too difficult. I lost you due to that failure, but I absolutely won't lose Noah as well. He is not yours to lose, Era pointed out clinically. He doesn't even know you exist. But he could. Graham retrieved his phone, quickly pulling up a digital photo and turning the screen toward her. Look, it was a photograph of Noah at his recent school science fair, beaming triumphantly at the camera, his detailed project model of Jupiter displayed proudly beside him. Where did you obtain this? School website, public gallery photos. Graham scrolled rapidly, showing her more. He won the class reading competition in September. He played a star in the winter pageant. He helped plant the school garden in the spring. I have absorbed more knowledge about my son in 2 days of research than some fathers accumulate in years. But it is insufficient. I need to physically be there for the next science fair, the next concert, the next time he is suddenly sick and terrified in a sterile hospital bed. Tears pricked painfully at Era's eyes. You cannot simply crash into his life. And I know, Graham cut in gently, I recognize it must be slow, methodical, entirely on your established terms. But please, Era, grant me the opportunity to step into the role of his father. The sheer vulnerability and raw honesty in his plea made her chest ache with conflicting emotions. She recalled all of Noah's vague, carefully phrased questions about his absent father over the years. She remembered the wistful light in his eyes whenever he saw other children with their dads at school functions. We would require rules, she conceded finally, her voice thin. Strict boundaries. Hope visibly flared, blazing in Graham's eyes. Anything. No unsupervised visits until Noah is completely comfortable with you. No revealing our home address to your mother. Absolutely no more lawyers or legal threats. And if you ever subject him to the emotional abandonment you subjected me to, I will take him so far away you will never locate either of us. I understand. I agree completely, Graham affirmed, his voice solemn, weighted with the promise. I won't fail either of you again. Era took a stabilizing deep breath. He has his checkup next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Dr. Rodriguez already informed you, didn't he? Graham had the good grace to look slightly sheepish. He might have briefly mentioned it. You can come, Era permitted, labeling it as their definitive first step. But Graham, she warned, meeting his gaze firmly, this interaction is not about us. Whatever past we share remains squarely in the past. This is only about Noah. Agreed, Graham said, though a quick, unreadable flicker crossed his eyes, momentarily accelerating her heartbeat. Noah comes first. As they finished their tense, truncated meals and prepared to depart, Era found herself involuntarily studying Graham. On the surface, he was the same impossibly handsome, controlled, projecting immense power. Yet, there was a profound shift in his entire demeanor, a newly visible vulnerability in the way he looked directly at her. Thank you, he said as they reached their respective vehicles, for extending me this opportunity. Era simply nodded, too afraid to trust her voice. As she drove back uptown, her mind raced, consumed by questions and self-doubt. Had she made an unforgivable mistake? Was she opening Noah up to devastating heartbreak? Was she dangerously exposing her own? No star. This was emphatically not about her own carefully guarded heart. This was about her son, who deserved the innate right to know his father. even if that father arrived wrapped in complicated, intense emotions and an even more intricate, painful past. When she arrived home, she discovered Noah soundly asleep on the sofa, his plush dinosaur clutched tightly against his chest. A nature documentary about Mars playing quietly on the television screen. Looking down at him, Era saw what she always saw. The perfect, undeniable combination of herself and Graham. A small miracle she had borne and protected alone for too long. Perhaps, she realized, the time had finally come to share that miracle with the one person who possessed an equal, intrinsic right to love him, even if that meant risking the integrity of her own fragile peace in the process. Tuesday dawned, heavy with the sense of irreversible destiny. Graham was pacing the expanse of his executive office, running a restless hand through his hair, glancing at the Patek Philippe watch strapped to his wrist for the 10th time within 10 minutes. It was 1:15 p.m. He had completely obliterated his schedule for the entire afternoon. A corporate event that had sent undeniable shockwaves throughout the meticulous structure of his company. "Sir." Jenkins materialized carefully in the doorway. "The board members are demanding updates regarding the Shanghai presentation logistics." "You possess my revised notes?" Graham replied, smoothing the knot of his silk tie, which he had already subconsciously adjusted 3 times. "Manage it, Jenkins. And your mother has called multiple times. She is quite insistent regarding—" "Not now, Jenkins." Graham decisively snatched his overcoat from the stand. "Not today." The drive toward Boston General Hospital felt impossibly long and simultaneously far too brief. Graham pulled into the visitor's lot at 1:45 p.m., his heartbeat hammering a frantic, uneven rhythm against his ribs. He realized, with a profound sense of irony, that he had approached hostile corporate acquisitions with significantly less internal anxiety than he felt now, simply walking into the brightly lit pediatric wing. Era was already waiting, dressed in her blue scrubs beneath a crisp white clinic coat. She had worked the morning shift, as she had briefly confirmed in her text message. Noah was seated next to her in the waiting area, his legs swinging gently, his face entirely absorbed in the vibrant illustrations of a book dedicated to planetary science. Graham's breath hitched painfully in the harsh, relentless fluorescent light. The resemblance between father and son was exponentially more striking in this clinical setting. Noah possessed a warm complexion and delicate, boyish features, but the sheer seriousness in the set of his small jaw, the intense concentration in the depths of his blue-gray eyes, those were indisputable, pure Whitaker traits. "Remember what we discussed, sweetie?" Era was saying softly, her hand resting reassuringly on his small back. "Dr. Rodriguez has invited someone new to attend your checkup today. Someone who is very keen on ensuring you feel absolutely better." Noah immediately lifted his head, his striking blue-gray eyes locking directly onto Graham's. There was no trace of apprehension in his intense gaze, only an open, deep curiosity, the identical analytical scrutiny Graham confronted in the reflection of his shaving mirror every dawn. "You're the man from last week," Noah stated clearly, his voice carrying a surprising articulation and volume for a 5-year-old. "When I was sick." Graham took a careful step nearer, struggling to maintain the evenness of his voice. "That's correct. I'm Graham. Why were you looking at me so much that night?" The sheer, simple directness of the innocent question was profoundly penetrating, causing Graham's chest to seize painfully. Era intervened smoothly, gently touching Noah's shoulder. "That is precisely part of the big conversation we need to have, baby. But first, let's allow Dr. Rodriguez to complete your assessment. All right?" "Okay." The examination room was a cheerful refuge, adorned with brightly painted, space-themed murals. Rockets soaring past stylized planets, astronauts adrift among glittering stars. Noah climbed onto the examination table entirely without hesitation, clearly familiar and comfortable in this routine environment. Dr. Rodriguez entered moments later, his perpetually kind eyes quickly assessing the unusual configuration. "Well, look who's here for his checkup, Noah. Quite a full house this afternoon." The doctor's examination was meticulous yet reassuringly gentle. He listened intently to Noah's subtle lung sounds, verified his peak flow measurements, and carefully reviewed the new medication delivery schedule. Throughout the entire process, Graham remained deliberately positioned slightly apart, absorbing every minute detail, the sound of the inhales, the mechanics of the stethoscope, the simple vulnerability of his son, with fierce, concentrated intensity. "Your respiratory functions sound significantly improved," Dr. Rodriguez announced cheerfully. "The adjusted medication protocol appears highly effective. Do you have any pressing questions for me, young man?" Noah raised his hand formally, precisely as he would in a kindergarten classroom. "Can I play soccer this season?" The question struck Graham with unexpected, physical force. It was such a quintessential, normal childhood aspiration, a simple wish he should have been aware of and part of fulfilling years ago. "With careful management of your medication and vigilant monitoring, I see no reason why not," Dr. Rodriguez confirmed, smiling kindly. "But you must be particularly cautious regarding cold weather and know definitively when to take mandatory breaks." "I'll monitor him vigilantly," Era promised quickly, then glanced at Graham, consciously amending her statement. "We will monitor him." Following the clinical portion, they transitioned to Dr. Rodriguez's private consultation office. Noah was seated strategically between Era and Graham, still fiercely clutching his oversized book on cosmology. "Noah," Era began, her voice meticulously careful. "Do you remember those times you've asked me about your dad?" The boy nodded once, his small fingers instinctively gripping the spine of his book tighter. "You explained that he had to go far away before I was born." Graham's throat constricted painfully. That simple, innocent childhood attempt to rationalize his abandonment felt like a knife twisting in his heart. "That's right," Era continued, her eyes fixed on her son. "But sometimes, when people go away, they can eventually return if they truly wish to be part of your life again, and if they are genuinely ready to be good for you." She drew a deep, visible breath. "Graham is your father, Noah." The 4 simple words hung suspended in the brightly decorated office. Noah slowly turned his eerily familiar gaze upon Graham, studying him with a penetrating intensity that seemed far beyond his years. "Is that why we have the exact same eyes?" he asked eventually. Graham nodded, entirely unable to force any sound past the lump in his throat. "And is that why you were looking at me that night? Because you didn't know about me before?" "Yes," Graham managed, the word a rasp. I truly didn't know. But now that I do, I want desperately to get to know you, Noah, if that is something you would be comfortable with." Noah considered this immense offer with remarkable gravity for a 5-year-old. "Do you like space, too?" The unexpected, perfectly childish pivot made Graham's eyes sting with sudden moisture. "I do, although I am quite certain you already possess far superior knowledge than I do." "I know enormous amounts," Noah confirmed, a delicate trace of proud excitement entering his voice. "Would you like to see my absolute favorite planet?" He immediately flipped his book open, locating a detailed spread on Jupiter. "It possesses 79 distinct moons. That's more than any other planet. And observe this spot." He pointed to the massive swirling great red spot. "It's actually a gigantic storm that has persisted for hundreds of years." Graham leaned in, acutely aware of the closeness, the shared space with his son. "That is absolutely astonishing. What else can you tell me about it?" For the next 15 minutes, Noah enthusiastically delivered an impromptu lecture on the gravitational dynamics of Jupiter, the danger of solar flares, and the history of space exploration. Graham absorbed every word, noting how Noah's hands moved expressively, exactly like Era's when she was passionate about a topic, and how his speech pattern carried the same subtle melodic cadence as hers. "Noah," Dr. Rodriguez interjected gently, seizing a lull in the Jupiter discussion. "How would you feel about dedicating some time to your father? To get to know each other more completely?" Noah's eyes instinctively flicked toward Era first, a silent, profound gesture that underscored the deep trust and connection they shared. When she offered him a small, encouraging nod, he turned back to Graham. "Could we visit the Space Museum?" "The Museum of Science," Era clarified for Graham. He has been begging to see their updated planetary exhibition. "I would genuinely love that," Graham responded instantly. If your mom agrees, perhaps we could all go this weekend. All three of us. The deliberate inclusion of all three of us was a cautious acknowledgement of the boundary Era had imposed, respecting her need for continued presence. The slight easing of tension in Era's shoulders confirmed he had chosen wisely. Can we, Mommy, please? Noah's eyes were sparkling with genuine excitement. They have an actual piece of Mars there. Saturday, Era agreed, confirming the date. But remember, you must use your preventative inhaler before we leave the house. And promise to inform us immediately if you start feeling even slightly tired. As they began to gather their belongings and prepare to exit the office, Noah performed an action that surprised everyone profoundly. He reached out and took Graham's large hand, his other small hand already securely linked with Era's, forming an unbroken chain as they walked to the parking lot. His small fingers felt impossibly precious in Graham's grasp, a fragile anchor to his new reality. Thank you, Graham said softly to Era over Noah's head. He held her gaze, not briefly this time, but long enough for the unspoken tension of 6 years to settle between them. He deserves to know you, the real you, Graham. Not the CEO, not your mother's son. Just you. In the parking lot, Noah launched himself at Graham's legs, hugging him impulsively with the fierce energy of a 4-year-old before clambering into the car. Bye, Dad. The word, so simple and yet so monumental, nearly brought Graham to his knees, shattering the rigid facade he had worn for decades. It was a title earned, not inherited, and it felt like a declaration of war against his old life. He watched Era's car pull away, his hands still tingling from his son's touch, the sensation grounding him. His phone buzzed incessantly. Probably his mother again, or the office, or one of a dozen corporate emergencies that used to consume his waking hours. But for the first time, those towering pressures felt insignificant, dwarfed by the miracle he'd just experienced. Being called Dad by a little boy who loved space and had his eyes. A miracle reflected in the rearview mirror as they drove away. Graham found himself opening his calendar app, the familiar executive interface suddenly feeling sterile and cold. He moved meetings, rearranged conferences, and blocked out every Saturday afternoon for the foreseeable future, labeling the slots simply family. Then he did something else that would have baffled his old self. He researched Jupiter, its violent, millennia-old storms, its icy moons, and every astronomical phenomenon that his son found so fascinating. Because next time Noah wanted to talk about space, Graham wouldn't just nod vaguely. He would be ready. Ready to listen. Ready to learn. Ready to be the father that this remarkable little boy deserved. Ready to be worthy of that precious, earned word, Dad. The corporate world could wait. For the first time in his life, Graham Alexander Whitaker had found something more important than success, more valuable than power, and infinitely more essential than his mother's brittle approval. He had found his son, and he was never letting go again. Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect autumn day in Boston, hinting at the crispness of the new season. Graham arrived at the Museum of Science 30 minutes early, his stomach tight with a mix of nerves and unprecedented excitement. He paced the entrance plaza, a sleek, powerful figure strangely out of place among the families streaming past, clutching his preparedness like a shield. He'd spent hours researching the planetary exhibition, determined to engage meaningfully with Noah's interests, terrified he might fail his first solo outing. His phone buzzed, a text from Era. Running 10 late. Noah insisted on bringing his serious space notebook, and had a brief argument with his shoes. Graham smiled genuinely, already familiar with the beloved notebook where Noah recorded his scientific observations, written in meticulous, childlike script. He'd learned more about his son in the past few days through careful, probing questions to Era than he had in the last 20 years about himself. Each detail was precious. Noah's favorite dinosaur, the Stegosaurus. His non-negotiable bedtime, 7:30 p.m. His habit of humming softly while he drew. The call, amplified by the open air, made Graham's heart leap with recognition and fierce pride. Noah ran toward him, his brightly colored backpack bouncing with the weight of scientific inquiry, Era following at a more measured, graceful pace. The boy wore a bright blue sweater with meticulously embroidered planets circling the chest, and Graham noticed his shoelaces were patterned with silver stars. "Hey, buddy." Graham knelt instantly to Noah's level, an unconscious gesture he'd practiced after reading about the importance of meeting a child's gaze in one of the parenting books he'd secretly devoured this week. "Ready to explore space?" Noah nodded enthusiastically, immediately unzipping his backpack to pull out the sacred notebook. "I made a list of questions about Mars. Did you know it has 2 moons? They're called Phobos and Deimos, and Phobos means fear. Let's get inside first," Era suggested gently, running a hand over Noah's shoulder. She looked lovely and relaxed in casual jeans and a soft burgundy sweater, her curls loose around her shoulders. "Remember to pace yourself, honey." Graham caught her meaning instantly, the subtle code referencing the constant worry they now shared. Noah's infectious excitement could sometimes trigger his asthma. "Your mom's right. We have all day to explore the universe." They got their tickets, Graham insisting on paying despite Era's quiet protest. As they entered the main hall, Noah walking confidently between them, holding a hand of each parent, Graham felt an unfamiliar, deep sensation settle over him. Contentment. This was how it should have been all along. The planetary exhibition was spectacular, filled with interactive displays, massive models, and real meteorite samples that smelled faintly of space dust. Noah moved from exhibit to exhibit, a tiny, passionate professor, his enthusiasm infectious as he shared facts about each planet, sometimes tripping over his own words in his eagerness. Graham found himself genuinely fascinated, not just by the astronomical information, but by the way his son's mind worked, analytical and imaginative at once, a perfect reflection of both his parents. "Look." Noah pressed his face against a thick display case containing a reddish, pitted rock. "That's a real piece of Mars. It came from a meteorite that landed in Antarctica." Actually, a cultured, utterly chilling voice cut in, slicing through the ambient noise of the museum. "It's from the Sahara Desert." "Really, dear? You should verify your facts." Graham's blood ran cold, turning to liquid ice in his veins. He knew that voice. It carried the weight of 1,000 expectations and disappointments. Turning slowly, he found himself face to face with his mother. Evelyn Whitaker stood there in an expensive, perfectly tailored cashmere ensemble, her perfectly coiffed silver hair and large diamond earrings distinctly, intimidatingly out of place among the casual weekend crowd. Behind her, Graham spotted her chauffeur, Jenkins, hovering uncertainly, looking as though he wished the floor would swallow him whole. "Mother." Graham's voice was tight, strained. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn gave a brittle smile. "I had to see for myself. When you missed the foundation meeting this morning, which we desperately need to discuss, by the way, I had Jenkins tell me where you'd be." Graham made a cold, mental note. "Fire Jenkins first thing Monday morning." "Mrs. Whitaker." Era's voice was coolly professional, laced with steel, as her arm moved protectively around Noah's shoulders. "This isn't the time or the place." Evelyn's gaze swept over Era dismissively, registering the casual clothes and the absence of pretense, before returning solely to Noah. Her expression softened slightly, calculatedly. "Well, there's no denying those eyes. He is a Whitaker through and through. We'll need to discuss his education, of course. Phillips Academy has an excellent primary program." "No." Graham's voice cut through the air like a blade, startling nearby museum-goers. The sound was low, dangerous, and absolute. "You don't get to do this. Not here. Not ever. Don't be dramatic, darling. I'm simply thinking of the boy's future. Surely you don't intend to leave him in public school and those clothes." She paused, her eyes lingering on the embroidered planets on Noah's sweater. "We can certainly do better than department store planets." Noah's fingers instinctively clutched his precious notebook tighter, while his other hand instinctively found Era's hip, clinging to her. Graham saw the quick, sharp hurt flash in his son's wide eyes, and something ancient and protective inside him snapped, tearing away years of emotional repression. "Outside," he growled, pointing toward the main entrance. "Now." Graham, Era started, sensing the impending explosion, but he touched her arm gently, reassuringly. It's okay. Take Noah to see the Mars rover exhibit. I'll handle this. In the quiet, echoing courtyard, Graham rounded on his mother, his shoulders set rigidly. How dare you? How dare I? What? Take an interest in my grandson's welfare? Really, Graham? You're being unreasonable. That woman, Graham's voice shook with controlled fury, is Noah's mother. She has raised him beautifully, given him everything he needs, and made him into an amazing little boy. A little boy you just publicly hurt with your thoughtless, cruel comments about his clothes and his school. I merely suggested. No, you tried to control. To remold him, to remake him into your sanitized image of what a Whittaker should be, just like you did to me. Graham stepped closer, towering over her, his eyes blazing with a lifetime of resentment. But here's what you need to understand, Mother. I won't let you do to Noah what you did to me. I won't let you make him feel like he's never good enough, never quite perfect enough for the almighty Whittaker name. Everything I did was for you, Evelyn protested, her composure momentarily cracking. To give you the best. The best what? The best empty life? The best lonely existence? I lost the love of my life because of you. I missed 5 years of my son's life because I was too weak and too afraid to stand up to you. But that ends now. His mother's face hardened, the mask of society descending again. If you think I'll stand by while you throw away everything we've built, you don't have a choice. Graham's voice was deadly quiet, the most frightening tone she had ever heard from him. Because if you ever try to interfere with Noah or Era again, I will walk away from everything. The company, the foundation, all of it. I'll start over from scratch if I have to. But I will not let you poison my son's life the way you poisoned mine. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Graham pulled out his phone, bypassing his numerous filters and pulling up his banking app. With a few decisive taps, he transferred a significant 7-figure sum to a new, previously dormant account. Consider that my resignation fund. Cross me on this, Mother, and I'll use it to finance my freedom. Evelyn stared at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time in years, recognizing the steely resolve she herself had instilled, now turned against her. You've changed. Yes, because for the first time in my life, I have something worth fighting for that isn't made of glass and marble. Graham straightened to his full, commanding height. Now leave, and don't come near my family again without an express, written invitation. Inside, Graham found Era and Noah in the Mars exhibit, standing near a giant replica of the Curiosity rover. Noah was quieter now, his earlier excitement dimmed, replaced by a subtle, withdrawn stillness. The sight made Graham's chest ache with guilt. Hey, buddy. He knelt beside his son, his voice softened. I'm sorry about that. Sometimes grown-ups, sometimes we forget what's really important. Noah looked up at him solemnly, those incredible blue-gray eyes searching his face. Your mom doesn't like my sweater. Your sweater is awesome, Graham said firmly, meeting the boy's gaze. And you know what? I learned more about space from you today than I ever learned in all those fancy schools. You're perfect, exactly as you are. Noah's smile returned slowly, hesitantly. Really? Really? Graham gently touched the small, embroidered planets on Noah's chest. Now, how about you tell me more about that Mars rover? I heard it sings itself happy birthday every year up there, all alone on Mars. Pretty cool, right? As Noah, encouraged, launched back into an explanation of atmospheric sampling and surface traversal, his enthusiasm rekindling like a star, Graham felt a warm hand brush his shoulder, Era's hand. A brief touch of understanding, and perhaps something infinitely more. Later, over ice cream in the museum cafe, Noah worked diligently on his space drawings while Graham and Era sat in companionable silence. Thank you, she said finally, her voice low, for standing up to her. I should have done it years ago. Graham watched Noah carefully color a perfect red spot on his Jupiter drawing. I won't let her hurt him like she hurt. Era's eyes met his, full of 6 years of memories and unspoken pain, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of emergent hope. Us? Before Graham could respond, Noah proudly held up his drawing, interrupting the delicate moment of shared vulnerability. "Look, I drew us in a rocket ship going to visit Jupiter." The picture showed 3 carefully drawn stick figures in a crayon spaceship. One tall with black hair, Graham, one with curly brown hair, Era, and a small one in the middle, Noah, holding both their hands. Graham felt an unexpected surge of emotion and the sharp prick of tears in his eyes. Because there it was, rendered in the pure, honest vision of a child's art, the family they could have been, and the family they might still become. If only he was brave enough to reach for it. Monday morning brought strategic chaos to Whitaker Industries. Graham's abrupt firing of Jenkins, who had served as his mother's eyes and ears for years, had sent shock waves through the corporate office. But it was Evelyn's unprecedented absence from the Foundation's weekly board meeting that really set tongues wagging. The great Evelyn Whitaker missing a social engagement? Unprecedented. Graham ignored the whispers, focused instead on the small, framed photo now prominently displayed on his desk. Noah at the museum, eyes bright with excitement as he explained the Mars exhibit. The image captured his son's passionate, unbridled spirit perfectly. Mr. Whitaker. His new assistant, Andrea Chun, a sharp young woman hired immediately after Jenkins' dismissal, appeared in the doorway. "The Shanghai team is waiting for the video call." "Push it back an hour," Graham said, checking his phone. A text from Era had just come in. Noah's school called. "His asthma's acting up. Not severe, but they recommend he rest." He was already standing, gathering his coat and keys. "The corporate report's forgotten. Actually, clear my schedule for the morning. Family emergency." Andrea's eyebrows rose slightly at the deviation from the rigid corporate protocol, but she merely nodded. Unlike Jenkins, she seemed to understand the concept of discretion, or perhaps she had simply seen the framed photo. 20 minutes later, Graham strode into Brighton Elementary's front office. The polished marble of Whitaker headquarters replaced by linoleum and the smell of industrial cleaner. Era was already there, speaking quietly with the school nurse. Noah sat nearby, his small body slightly hunched. His breathing labored but not dangerously so. "Dad." Noah's face lit up despite his discomfort, instantly recognizing the towering figure in the tailored suit. The school nurse looked startled, glancing between Graham and Era. Graham realized this was probably the first time most people at Noah's school had seen his father. "Hey, buddy." Graham knelt beside Noah's chair, immediately assessing his breathing. "Rough morning?" Noah nodded, clutching his inhaler almost like a lifeline. "The class was playing soccer. I wanted to keep up." "He knows better," Era said, her tone more worried than angry. "Noah, honey, you have to take breaks when—" "I just wanted to be normal," Noah whispered, the words catching in his throat. The words hit Graham like a physical blow, a far greater injury than anything his mother had inflicted on him years ago. He thought of Evelyn's dismissive comments about Noah's clothes, his school, his life. Had they affected the boy more deeply than they'd realized? "Look at me, Noah." Graham waited until those familiar blue-gray eyes met his, clear and earnest. "You are normal. You're also extraordinary. Having asthma doesn't change that. It just means you have to be smarter about how you do things. And you know what? Being smart is your superpower." Noah's breathing seemed to ease slightly as he absorbed the unexpected context. Like how astronauts have to be smart about their oxygen in space. Exactly. Graham smiled, relieved to see his son's innate scientific curiosity resurface, overriding the embarrassment. They can't just run around using up all their air, right? They have to plan carefully. "I've been telling him that for ages," Era murmured. But there was no resentment in her voice. If anything, she sounded profoundly grateful. The nurse cleared her throat discreetly. "His breathing is stabilizing, but he should probably go home and rest." "I'll take him," Graham and Era said simultaneously, their protective instincts perfectly synchronized. They looked at each other, years of unspoken feelings and complex history passing between them in that brief, resonant moment. "We could both," Graham started carefully, realizing the immediate logistical entanglement. "Yes," Era agreed, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "Noah should rest and we need to talk anyway." They signed Noah out, Graham carrying his son's oversized, science-filled backpack while Era held Noah's hand. In the parking lot, Noah looked between their two distinctly different cars uncertainly. "How about we all go in my car?" Graham suggested smoothly. "We can pick up Mom's car later." The drive to Era's apartment was quiet, Noah dozing peacefully in the back seat while soft classical music played on the radio. A preference Graham had forgotten he shared with Era. Graham followed directions through a pleasant, tree-lined middle-class neighborhood, noting the parks and libraries nearby. She'd chosen well for their son, creating a stable, nurturing environment away from the cold, manicured isolation of the Whitaker estate. Era's apartment was on the second floor of a well-maintained building. Inside, Graham was struck by how perfectly the space reflected both Era and Noah. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with complex medical texts balanced by children's astronomy books. A meticulously constructed solar system mobile hung over the living room, and Noah's colorful, imaginative artwork decorated the refrigerator. "You can put him in his room," Era said softly, her voice hushed as Noah drowsed heavily against Graham's shoulder. "Second door on the left." Noah's room was a precise, glorious realization of a child's dream of space exploration. Glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the ceiling in accurate constellation patterns. A decent-sized telescope stood by the window, and model rockets and planets hung from carefully arranged strings. Graham laid Noah gently on his bed, decorated with cosmic patterned sheets. As he pulled off his son's scuffed sneakers, he noticed the wear and tear at the toes. Noah had been growing fast. "He needs new sneakers," he murmured when he rejoined Era in the living room. "I know." She handed him a cup of coffee, black, 1 sugar. She still remembered exactly how he took it. "He's growing so fast lately." They sat on the couch, a careful, respectful distance maintained between them. Through the open door, they could hear Noah's steady, calm breathing. "Thank you for coming today," Era said finally, setting down her own mug. "It meant a lot to him, to both of us." "I meant what I said yesterday about my mother." Graham set his coffee down, his posture professional, yet his eyes revealing his dedication. "I've arranged for new security protocols at his school. She won't be able to just show up there. It's not just her showing up I'm worried about." Era tucked her legs under her, a familiar, comfortable gesture that made Graham's heart ache with a pang of memory. "It's her influence. The way she gets into people's heads. The way she got into yours." "Not anymore." Graham's voice was firm, unshakable. "I spent the past 6 years trying to be the son she wanted. But being Noah's father is teaching me how to be the man I should have been all along." Era studied him thoughtfully, noticing the subtle shift in his aura, the lessening of the corporate tension around his mouth. "You've changed. Having your world turned upside down will do that." He smiled slightly, a rare, genuine expression. "Finding out you have a brilliant son who loves space and has your smile puts things in perspective." "He does have my smile," Era agreed softly, a warmth returning to her eyes. "But he has your determination, your focus, the way he tackles a problem and won't let go until he understands it completely. That's all you." "I want to be more involved," Graham said carefully, leaning forward slightly, minimizing the distance between them. "Not just for emergencies or weekend visits. I want to be there for the everyday moments, too. The homework, the doctor's appointments, the shopping for new sneakers. That would mean seeing a lot more of each other." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility, acknowledging the deep logistical and emotional complexity of the request. Graham turned to face her fully, ignoring the pull of propriety. "Would that be so terrible?" Era's breath caught momentarily. "Graham, I know we agreed this isn't about us," he said quickly, anticipating her retreat. "And it's not. It's about giving Noah the family he deserves." But he hesitated, gathering his courage, before continuing with forced honesty. "Watching you with him, seeing what an amazing mother you are, how you've built this wonderful life for him, it makes me realize what I gave up 6 years ago, what I threw away because I was too weak to fight for it. We can't go back," Era whispered, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears, betraying the strength of her emotion. "No, but maybe we can go forward, build something new." something better. For Noah's sake, of course, but also. A small, sleepy noise from Noah's room interrupted the fragile confession. They both rose instantly, their parental instincts perfectly in sync. Noah was sitting up in bed, blinking sleepily. "Can we have soup?" he asked in a small voice, the star-shaped pasta kind. "Of course, baby." Era smoothed his hair back tenderly. "Dad can stay for lunch if he wants." Noah smiled at Graham hopefully. "Will you? And maybe you can help me with my space project. We're learning about constellations, and I have to make my own and tell its story." Graham met Era's eyes over their son's head. In that moment, he saw their own constellation forming. 3 stars finding their orbit around each other. New patterns emerging from old light and deep shadow. "I'd love to," he said softly, the weight of the word love feeling significant. "I'd love to stay." 3 weeks of relative peace had lulled them into a false sense of security. Graham had fallen into a comfortable, deeply satisfying routine. Breakfast with Noah and Era twice a week, school pickups on Wednesdays, weekend adventures that always seemed to end with the 3 of them sharing meals and laughter, often in Era's small, warm kitchen. It felt natural, inevitable, the domestic harmony replacing his lifelong corporate anxiety. Right until the storm hit with the brutal suddenness of a tropical squall. "Mr. Whitaker." Andrea's voice crackled through his office intercom, sharp with urgency. "There's something you need to see." Graham looked up from the report he'd been reviewing, Noah's latest asthma assessment from Dr. Rodriguez, which he now tracked meticulously. "What is it?" Andrea appeared in his doorway, holding a tablet like a weapon. "The Boston Globe's website. It just went live 10 minutes ago." The headline made his blood run cold, instantly erasing 3 weeks of peace. Whitaker Air Scandal. CEO's secret love child revealed. Below it was a grainy photo of Noah, clearly taken with a long telephoto lens outside his elementary school, side by side with an old, high-contrast photo of Graham at the same age. The resemblance was undeniable, devastatingly exploited for maximum public shock. Graham's private line rang immediately, its insistent, shrill sound cutting through the opulent silence of the office. "Era, have you seen it?" Her voice was tight with controlled panic, vibrating with a fear that reached through the phone line. "I'm looking at it now." Graham's hands clenched into fists, knuckles white against his polished mahogany desk. "I'll have my lawyers." "Forget your lawyers. There are reporters outside Noah's school right now. The principal just called. He's scared, Graham. Our son is scared. Our son." Any other time, those 2 words would have thrilled him, sealing their shared future. Now they just heightened his icy fury. "I'm on my way. Don't talk to anyone. I'll handle this." But when he reached for his tailored coat, his private line rang again. The number was blocked, but he knew exactly who it was. "Hello, Mother. Darling." Evelyn's voice was smooth as aged whiskey, devoid of surprise, perhaps even containing a hint of grim satisfaction. "I trust you've seen the news. Did you do this? Please." She sounded genuinely offended. "I would never expose family matters so crudely to the press. But since it's out there, we should discuss immediate damage control. I've already called the board." Graham cut her off, his voice flat and hard. "The only damage I'm controlling is the damage to my son's privacy. Stay out of this, Mother. I mean it." He hung up without waiting for her response and turned to Andrea, his face a mask of command. "Get me Maxwell Rivera from legal. Have him meet me immediately at Brighton Elementary. And find out who leaked the story. I want them ruined." The scene at Noah's school was chaos. Reporters clustered thickly at the main gates, held back by hastily organized security. Graham spotted Era's recognizable car in the parking lot and pulled his luxury sedan in tightly beside it, ignoring the flashing cameras. Inside the principal's small, functional office, he found Noah curled tightly in Era's lap, his face buried deep in her neck. Lucia, the fierce school nurse whom Graham had met at several of Noah's doctor's appointments, stood guard by the door like an angry lioness. "Daddy." Noah's voice was small, muffled. Graham's heart broke, physically, in his chest. Gone was the confident little boy who loved explaining space facts. This Noah seemed younger, smaller, utterly vulnerable. "Hey, buddy." He knelt beside them, ignoring the ache in his knees. "I'm sorry about all the crazy people outside. They're just very interested in our family." "Because you're rich and important?" Noah asked with devastating, unsparing directness, lifting his head just enough to see Graham. "That's what Tyler said at recess. He said I was only pretending to like space because you're my dad now." Graham felt his entire body stiffen, a rush of cold outrage washing over him. They'd been so careful, so deliberate, to keep Noah's routine normal, to prevent exactly this kind of malicious fallout. Noah Sebastian Monroe Whitaker. Graham used his son's full name for the first time in front of Era, the words acting as an anchor. "You loved space long before I came along. You're the one who taught me about Jupiter's moons and Mars rovers. Remember? Never, ever let anyone tell you what you love or who you are." The principal cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Whitaker, I really think." "Whitaker, Miss Monroe, we need to discuss security arrangements immediately. The press presence is unsustainable. And there is the separate matter of several highly competitive private schools that have already called with full scholarship offers." A dizzying response, frankly. "No, cut in Era." Her voice steady and resolute despite the chaos. "Noah stays here. He needs his friends, his teachers, his normal life, not an immediate upheaval driven by PR or panic." "Of course," Graham agreed immediately, sensing the fragile necessity of routine for his son. "But we do need better security." He turned as Maxwell Rivera entered, moving with the tailored efficiency of a man accustomed to crisis. "Max, looking sharp in his bespoke suit, his legal armor, what are our options?" The next hour was a blur of high-stakes legal terms and tactical protective measures. They discussed the painful specifics, the necessary restraining orders against the more aggressive photographers, media statements crafted with deliberately tedious language, designed to bore rather than inflame public interest, security protocols that would create an invisible shield around Noah without suffocating his childhood. "The initial spike of the story will die down," Max assured them, leaning back after detailing the strategy. "But you might want to consider getting ahead of it, controlling the narrative. A controlled interview, perhaps. People love a good father meets long-lost child story, especially one involving a figure like Graham." "No interviews," Graham and Era said simultaneously, their agreement echoing loudly in the spacious office. Noah had fallen asleep on the sofa, utterly exhausted by the whirlwind of emotional and public stress. Graham watched the slow, even rise and fall of his chest, remembering acutely how fragile that breath could become when his son was stressed or fearful. "He can't go back to class today," Era said softly, gazing at the media circus still swirling outside the building below. "Not with that madness waiting for him." "Come to my place," Graham suggested, the idea forming suddenly. "It's secure, private. We can figure this out without an audience." He needed a fortress, and his home was the safest he knew. Era hesitated, grappling with the implications of crossing that personal boundary, but Noah stirred restlessly in her arms, anchoring her decision in the present. "Okay, but just for today," she agreed, her stipulation more for herself than for him. Graham's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a luxury building, designed for discreet security and accessed by a private, coded elevator. He'd never brought Noah here before. It had always seemed too soon, too loaded with unspoken commitments. Now, watching his son wake up and take in the magnificent wall of windows overlooking Boston Harbor, a view that seemed to stretch out to the horizon, Graham wished he'd done it sooner. Noah's eyes widened, reflecting the vast blue of the sky and the water below. "You can see the whole sky from here. Wait until night," Graham said without thinking, the words driven purely by the urge to share something beautiful. "The stars are amazing up here." Era shot him a meaningful look. They hadn't discussed sleepovers yet, or the prospect of nights together. But Noah was already exploring, his natural curiosity immediately overtaking his earlier distress. "Dad, you have a telescope, too." The professional-grade telescope, mounted discreetly on the upper balcony, had been a very recent purchase, inspired entirely by Noah's fervent passion for the cosmos. Graham had been waiting for the exact right low-pressure moment to share it. You want to learn how to use it? For the next hour, they lost themselves entirely in astronomy. Graham, usually absorbed in global finance, showed Noah how to adjust the heavy, sensitive settings while Era quietly ordered lunch and fielded calls from concerned friends and colleagues. It was almost normal, almost perfect. A bubble of domesticity suspended high above the chaotic city, until Graham's private elevator chimed, signaling an arrival. "That's impossible," he said, rising instantly, tension returning to his shoulders. Security knows not to allow anyone up unannounced. But Evelyn Whittaker had always considered herself above mere security protocols, viewing them as rules for lesser mortals. She stepped out of the elevator like a queen entering her court, her expensive attire radiating cold disapproval. "Really, darling? Ignoring my calls? Now that this entire disastrous affair is public, we need to—" She trailed off, her meticulously crafted speech dissolving as she took in the scene. Noah's brightly colored backpack lay carelessly by the Italian leather sofa. Era's medical journal was spread across the sleek coffee table, and the half-eaten, casual lunch was laid out on the dining table. It was undeniable proof of shared life. "What is this?" Her voice was low and dangerous, capable of freezing mercury mid-flow. "This is my family," Graham said quietly, stepping forward to shield Era and the room. "The family you tried to keep me from. The family I choose. Family." Evelyn's laugh was brittle, sharp as broken glass. "This woman who hid your child from you for years, who is probably—" She eyed the opulent surroundings. "After your money now that you've finally acknowledged him." "Stop." Graham's voice cracked like thunder, raw and sudden, instantly silencing her. "You don't get to come into my home and insult the mother of my child. Not ever again." Noah appeared in the doorway to the study, clutching his space notebook, drawn by the raised voices. "Dad, is everything okay?" The subsequent silence was deafening, heavy with unstated history, because there, framed in the doorway, was living proof of everything Evelyn Whittaker had tried desperately to deny. A perfect, undeniable blend of Graham and Era, of financial power and quiet compassion, of privilege and startling authenticity. "Noah." Evelyn's voice softened slightly, an instinctive human reaction breaking through her carefully constructed facade. "You're leaving," Graham interrupted, his gaze fixed on his mother, his tone final. "You're leaving, mother. And this time, don't come back until you truly understand what family really means." After she left, the silence felt heavy, but cleansing. Noah looked between his parents uncertainly. "Can we go back to learning about the telescope?" The simple, innocent request broke the immense tension. Graham laughed, a real, unburdened sound that seemed to surprise even himself. "Of course we can, buddy." In fact, he met Era's eyes, a question in his own. "Maybe you and Mom would like to stay for dinner? We could order a colossal amount of pizza, and when it gets dark, I'll show you both how to find the constellation you invented for your school project." "Can we, Mom?" Noah's eyes were wide and hopeful, illuminated by the prospect of stars and pizza. "Please." Era looked at their son, their brilliant, resilient son, who had navigated this brutally stressful day with more innate grace than any 5-year-old should ever have to muster. Then she looked at Graham, who had finally, unequivocally, chosen them over everything else, over his heritage, his mother, and his public image. "Yes," she said softly, the word a commitment. "We can stay. Because sometimes in the midst of life's fiercest storms, when everything seems lost, you find your true north. Sometimes the very chaos that threatens to tear you apart actually shows you precisely what is worth holding on to. And sometimes watching your child learn about the infinite nature of the cosmos through his father's expensive, powerful telescope, you realize that some loves are stronger than pride, stronger than past hurt, stronger even than the passage of time itself." That spontaneous pizza dinner turned into breakfast the next morning, which quickly morphed into another dinner and another. Before anyone quite realized it, Graham's cold, sterile penthouse had become their sanctuary from the relentless media storm, a space where they could just be a family, messy, honest, and together. 2 weeks after the news broke, Graham sat in his home office, watching Noah do homework at his massive mahogany desk. The boy had naturally claimed a corner, his space books and colored pencils scattered carelessly across quarterly financial reports. "Dad!" Noah looked up from his assignment, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What's bigger, Jupiter's great red spot or Earth?" "The storm is about twice Earth size," Graham answered automatically, not even having to think. He'd been studying space facts religiously, determined to keep up with his son's ever-expanding interest and knowledge. "That's what I thought." Noah scribbled the fact down importantly in his notebook. "Mom, did you hear that?" Era appeared in the doorway moments later, still in her worn surgical scrubs from her hospital shift. She'd started keeping spare clothes at the penthouse, for convenience, she claimed, though Graham noticed she always chose the drawer he'd always subconsciously left empty in his master bedroom. "I heard." She smiled, dropping a quick, familiar kiss on Noah's head. "But homework first, space facts later. Remember?" Graham watched them, his heart pleasantly full. These casual, unexpected moments of domestic harmony had become utterly precious to him. Noah's worn textbooks mixed with his high-stakes business files. Era's medical journals lay open on his stark coffee table. Their son's joyous laughter echoed through rooms that had once been silent, cold, and echoing. "The board meeting went well?" Era asked quietly as Noah returned to his math problems, clearly relaxed enough to discuss work. Graham nodded, leaning back. The media frenzy had ironically worked entirely in his favor, humanizing him to nervous investors. His fierce public acknowledgement of Noah, his immediate and rigid protection of his son's privacy, and his obvious, deep devotion to fatherhood had entirely transformed his image from cold, calculating corporate titan to sympathetic, deeply committed family man. "The Shanghai deal is final," he said, gesturing to the stack of reports. "But I've restructured my schedule. No more international travel without discussing it with you first. Noah's needs come before any business acquisition now." Era's eyes softened, a deep warmth flooding her expression. "You really have changed. You both changed me." Graham glanced at their son, who was now humming softly as he worked, a nervous but endearing habit he'd inherited from Era. "I never knew what I was truly missing until—" A polite, yet insistent knock interrupted the tender moment. Andrea stood in the doorway, looking highly apologetic. "Mr. Whitaker, the developers for the new Children's Hospital wing are here for the final approval meeting." Graham had almost forgotten. The pediatric wing expansion, a project he'd immediately initiated after learning about Noah's frequent, traumatic hospital stays, was nearly complete. "Send them to the conference room." He turned to Noah, his face lighting up. "Hey buddy, want to see something cool? These people are building a special part of the hospital just for kids like you." Noah's eyes lit up, abandoning math instantly. "Can I show them my ideas?" "I drew pictures of what a space hospital would look like." Graham met Era's gaze, seeking permission. She nodded, amused by Noah's audacity. "Just remember your inhaler if you get too excited." The developers, a collection of serious, highly pragmatic men and women in expensive conservative suits, were completely unprepared for Hurricane Noah. The 5-year-old burst into the polished conference room with his notebook full of vibrant crayon drawings showing hospital rooms decorated not with bland pastels, but with shimmering stars and complex planets. "See?" Noah pointed emphatically to his drawings. "The ceiling could look like the real night sky, and the machines could make gentle space noises instead of that horrible beeping sound. And look, the doctors could wear cool spacesuits instead of those boring white coats." To Graham's utter surprise, the lead architect, a severe woman named Ms. Jennings, actually looked genuinely interested. "The ambient lighting concept could actually work well," she murmured, considering the crayon sky. "And themed medical equipment might substantially help reduce anxiety in young patients. The psychological impact of environment on pediatric recovery rates is well documented," Era added, her expertise as a nurse instantly showing. "Noah's ideas might seem fanciful, but the underlying principle is profoundly sound." Graham watched his son passionately explain his vision, supported perfectly by his mother's professional insights. In that singular moment, he saw not just his immediate family, but his true legacy. Not the cold, towering corporate empire his mother had envisioned for him, but something infinitely warmer, more human. A place where shrewd business sense and deep compassion could coexist and thrive. After the meeting, Noah crashed on the plush office sofa, tired but blissfully happy, convinced he had just revolutionized modern hospital design. Era tucked a soft blanket around him, one of several that had mysteriously migrated from her smaller apartment to the expansive penthouse. "He's going to change the world someday," Graham said softly, watching the rise and fall of their son's quiet breathing. "He already has." Era touched Noah's cheek gently, her eyes meeting Graham's. "He changed ours." The setting sun painted the office in soft gold, casting long shadows, and Graham was struck by how incredibly right this felt. His son sleeping peacefully in his office. Era's presence filling the emotional spaces that had always been empty within the vast penthouse walls. This was the life he should have had all along. "Move in with me," he said suddenly, the words bursting forth without premeditation. Era's hand stilled completely on Noah's blanket. "What? Both of you move in here. We're here almost all the time anyway. Noah loves the view, he needs the space for his projects. You wouldn't have to commute so far to the hospital anymore. We could, Graham." Era's voice was gentle but firm, weighted by caution. "We can't just." "Why not?" He moved closer, careful not to disturb their sleeping son. "Give me one reason that isn't about the past. One reason that isn't about fear." "Because..." Era struggled for the right words, then sighed, letting the truth escape. "Because I'm still in love with you, and that terrifies me more than anything." The confession hung heavy in the air between them, shimmering with vulnerability. Graham's heart hammered a powerful rhythm against his ribs. "It should terrify you," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Because I'm still in love with you, too. I never stopped." "Really? And this time I could lose so much more than just you. I could lose him, too." "You won't." Graham's voice was suddenly fierce, absolute. "Whatever happens between us, whether we succeed or fail, you are Noah's mother and I am his father. That relationship doesn't change. But everything else could change." Graham reached for her hand, encouraged immensely when she didn't pull away, but gripped his instead. "Maybe for the better. We're not who we were 6 years ago, Era. I'm not that weak man who let his mother rule his life and choices. You're not that young woman who had to protect herself so fiercely from being hurt again. We've grown, we've evolved. Maybe it's time our relationship evolved, too." Noah stirred slightly, mumbling something about the red dust of Mars in his sleep. They both looked down at their son. This miracle they had created together, the undeniable core of their connection. "One condition," Era said finally, meeting his eyes with renewed resolve. "We take it incredibly slow. We don't tell Noah we're exploring this or that we're a couple until we are absolutely sure. He deserves stability, not another upheaval." "Agreed." Graham squeezed her hand, a profound sense of hope filling him. "But about moving in? That's practical, Era." Era conceded, a small smile touching her lips. "For Noah's sake, the security here is certainly better, and the school is actually closer. But I keep my apartment for now, as a safety net. Whatever you need." Graham touched her cheek softly, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. "I'll wait. I'll prove myself however long it takes you to trust me again." The sun had set fully now, and the first few stars were appearing in the darkening sky above Boston Harbor. Noah would want to use the telescope when he woke up. Their son, who loved the stars, who dreamed of endless space, who had unknowingly drawn his parents back into each other's irresistible orbit. "Did you know?" Noah mumbled, stirring again, half awake and half dreaming. "That some stars are actually 2 stars, so close together they look like one?" Graham and Era exchanged glances, wondering exactly how much of their conversation he had absorbed. But Noah just yawned deeply and snuggled further into his blanket. "Binary stars," Graham said softly, answering his son's half-question. His gaze locked on Era. "They orbit each other, held in perfect balance. Neither one truly complete without the other." Era's fingers tightened around his own. Outside, the city lights twinkled like millions of earthbound stars, and somewhere, far in the vast night sky, Jupiter's great storm kept spinning, eternal and patient, just like love. 6 months later, Graham stood proudly in the newly completed pediatric wing of Boston General Hospital, watching his son captivate an entire audience. Noah, now 6 and utterly self-possessed, was officially cutting the ribbon for the new space-themed children's ward that had been inspired directly by his crayon drawings. And this, Noah explained to the gathered donors and press, his small voice clear and confident, is the Galaxy Room, where kids can watch the stars while they get their medicine, because space makes everything better. Beside Graham, Era squeezed his hand tightly. She wore an elegant blue dress for the formal occasion, though her hospital ID still hung around her neck. She had insisted on remaining hands-on with patient care despite her recent promotion to Director of Pediatric Nursing. He's a natural speaker, Dr. Rodriguez remarked to Graham, watching Noah point out the constellations meticulously painted on the ceiling. Just like his father with presentations, but clearly with his mother's heart. Graham's throat tightened with a wave of unexpected emotion. The past 6 months had been profoundly transformative. Noah had flourished. His asthma was better controlled, and his inherent confidence had blossomed. The media interest had completely faded, replaced instead by genuine admiration for the family's unexpected philanthropy and deep dedication to children's healthcare. Even Evelyn had begun to change. After 3 months of absolute silence, she had appeared at the penthouse one Sunday morning, not to criticize but merely to listen. She had sat quietly as Noah explained the solar system in minute detail, actually smiling when he corrected her outdated astronomy facts. It was a small, quiet step, but a profoundly significant one. And now Noah was saying, his voice radiating pride, "My grandma is helping other kids like me get special doctors for their breathing problems." The Whitaker Foundation's sudden, new focus on pediatric respiratory care had been Evelyn's tangible olive branch, her unspoken apology. Perhaps she couldn't undo the severe mistakes of the past, but she could certainly help shape a better, healthier future. "Dad," Noah called out, snapping Graham back to the present. "Can you tell them about the special equipment? The one that looks like a spaceship?" Graham stepped forward, lifting Noah easily onto his hip, a gesture that now felt as natural and effortless as breathing. "The new pulmonary function testing unit does look a bit like a spaceship, doesn't it, buddy?" he agreed. "But more importantly, it'll help doctors understand exactly how to help kids breathe better than ever before." As Graham explained the technical details to the impressed donors, he felt Era's presence beside him, steady and utterly sure. They had moved in together 3 months ago, though she had kept her apartment as a practical safety net, as promised. But just last week, she had quietly begun packing it up. Neither had mentioned the finality directly, but they both knew exactly what it meant. And now, the hospital administrator announced, "We invite you all to the reception in the new family lounge." The crowd moved away, leaving the family alone in the brightly themed Galaxy Room. Noah wiggled down from Graham's arms, running to the window seat that had been custom designed according to his specifications. "Can we stay here a minute?" he asked. "I want to show you something important." Graham and Era exchanged quick, warm glances, then joined their son on the cushioned window seat. Outside, the Boston skyline glittered, incandescent in the early evening light. "I made this for you," Noah said, pulling a slightly crumpled, treasured paper from his pocket. "For both of you." It was a drawing more sophisticated and detailed than his earlier crayon works. It showed the 3 of them standing under a massive starry sky, but this time they weren't in a fantasy rocket ship. They were standing in front of a house, a detailed rendering of Graham's penthouse, complete with the famous telescope positioned prominently on the balcony. "It's our home," Noah explained simply. "All of us together forever. See?" Noah pointed to the 3 stars he'd drawn clustered above the building. "That's the constellation I invented. Remember when I had to make one for school? I called it Familiar Nova New Family because that's exactly what we are." Era's breath hitched in her throat. They hadn't told Noah about her moving in permanently, wanting to be completely certain before disrupting his world again. "Noah," Era said softly, her voice thick with emotion, "how would you feel if we made this official? If Mom and all her things moved in with you and Dad permanently? Noah's face lit up with overwhelming joy. Really? You mean it? Really, Graham confirmed, smiling widely. If that's what you want, buddy. But that's not all, Era continued, her voice trembling slightly with sudden daring. How would you feel if Mom and Dad got married again? Graham's heart stopped entirely. They hadn't discussed this moment, hadn't planned a formal proposal. But looking at Era now, her eyes full of hope and certainty, he knew it was utterly right. They had spent 6 months rebuilding trust, relearning each other, creating something deeper and stronger than what they'd had before. Noah looked between them, his expression becoming serious with the weight of the decision. Would everything change? No, buddy, Graham assured him, pulling him close. We'd still be us, still have our space talks and telescope nights, still be a family. We'd just be making it official, like you said in your drawing. And we'd never do it without making sure you're completely okay with it, Era added, needing his full consent. Noah considered this with his characteristic, intense thoroughness. Would we still live here with the telescope and the stars? Yes, they answered together, immediate and unified. And would Grandma still come for Sunday breakfast? She's getting better at space facts now. Graham smiled. Yes, if you want her to. And would we still help other kids at the hospital? Because I have more ideas for the space rooms. Always, Era promised, kissing his forehead. That's part of who we are now. Noah nodded solemnly. Then I think it's a good idea. Because you know what else I learned about stars? Sometimes they look separate, but they're actually binary stars, always meant to be together. Like you said, Dad, remember? Graham pulled both Noah and Era close, holding his family, finally complete, securely in his arms. Through the massive window, the first true stars of the evening were appearing, including Jupiter, bright and steady in the darkening sky. I have one condition, though, Noah added seriously, pulling back slightly. What's that, baby? Era asked, trying to contain her rising emotion. Can we have the wedding in the galaxy room? And can I wear my NASA tie? Graham laughed, the sound full of joy, relief, and promise. I think that's perfect. After all, it was space that brought us back together. No, Era corrected gently, touching Noah's cheek with profound tenderness. It was love. Love and a little boy who saw the whole universe in everything. Outside, a faint shooting star streaked across the sky, a final cosmic punctuation mark to their moment of perfect alignment. Noah gasped in pure delight, but Graham and Era were looking only at each other, seeing in each other's eyes the same immutable truth. Sometimes love takes a long, roundabout path through the stars. Sometimes you have to lose your way entirely to find your true constellation. And sometimes, if you are very lucky and patient, the universe gives you a second chance to make things absolutely right. Not just for yourself, but for the beautiful, brilliant child who drew your hearts back together with crayon stars and endless, impossible dreams of space. I love you, Graham whispered. The words meant equally for his son, and the woman who had given him this second chance at deep happiness. To infinity? Noah asked, using their new favorite phrase, a binding promise. And beyond. Era completed the answer, her smile as radiant as any star in the night sky. Because some loves are truly written in the stars, some families are destined to find their way back to each other, and some stories, like the great, eternal storms of Jupiter, keep spinning through time and space until they find their perfect ending. Not in the cold, unreachable reaches of outer space, but in the warm, secure embrace of a family, finally, beautifully, cosmically complete. 1 year later, the observation deck of the Museum of Science buzzed with quiet excitement as a small, distinguished crowd gathered for a private evening event. Noah, now 7 and wearing a miniature version of his father's suit, stood proudly next to his new, high-powered telescope, a joint gift from his parents and his grandmother, Evelyn, for his role in tonight's presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Rodriguez announced warmly to the assembled hospital board members and donors, I present our youngest astronomy club mentor, Noah Monroe Whitaker. Noah stepped forward, confidence radiating from his small frame. He wore his beloved NASA tie and his mother's warm, engaging smile. "Welcome to the first meeting of the Children's Astronomy Health Initiative," he began, his voice clear and strong, already sounding like a practiced presenter. "Where kids like me can learn about space while getting better and forgetting about their troubles." The program had been entirely Noah's idea, combining his deep love of astronomy with his intense desire to help other children managing chronic conditions. Every month, young patients from Boston General would gather here to stargaze, learn about space, and temporarily forget about the challenges of their health. Graham stood at the back of the room, his arm securely around Era, who now wore not just her hospital ID, but also a simple, stunning diamond ring that caught the starlight streaming through the observatory's dome. Their own quiet wedding 6 months ago had taken place exactly as Noah requested. In the galaxy room of the new pediatric wing, with the ceiling lights dimmed and the entire event centered on the celestial wonder that had bound them together. Indeed taken place in the galaxy room, a space designed to mimic the hushed reverence of deep space, bathed in the soft glow of projected nebulae. Noah commanded the attention of the room, playing the dual, very important roles of best man and, symbolically, ring-bearer for the future of astronomical passion. "Look!" Noah pointed excitedly through the eyepiece of a professional-grade telescope, his voice ringing with pure wonder. "You can see all 4 of Jupiter's Galilean moons tonight. They are perfectly aligned. Did you know that Jupiter's great red spot, that massive, ancient storm, is starting to change color? Scientists think it might be because the storm is actually getting taller, not wider." As their son launched into his intricate explanation of atmospheric physics, Era leaned into Graham's steady, comforting embrace, a soft, silent sigh escaping her lips. "He's still teaching us something new every single day." "Just like his mother," Graham murmured back, pressing a kiss deep into her temple, breathing in the scent of her hair. The parallel was clear. Both Era and Noah possessed a restless, beautiful curiosity that never stopped probing the universe for deeper truths. Evelyn Whitaker, seated meticulously in the front row, a figure of elegant repose, beamed with a pride that was finally genuinely earned. She had found her own profound redemption not through grand gestures, but by humbly supporting Noah's unique vision. The immense, often controversial resources of the Whitaker Foundation were now actively dedicated to children's healthcare initiatives, specifically focusing on merging recovery with educational passion. Spaces like this observatory, funded for community access. After the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, the family slipped away and gathered on the quiet sanctity of the observation deck. Noah was already deeply absorbed, gently guiding a young patient in a wheelchair, a girl with sparkling eyes, on how to focus the massive telescope correctly. His gentle patience and inherent empathy were pure Era, a quality Graham adored watching blossom in his son. "Dad, Mom, come look," he called out softly, beckoning them closer. "You can see our constellation tonight." They joined him at the telescope, adjusting their eyes to the velvet blackness. And sure enough, centered perfectly in the lens, they were shown the bright, familiar stars of Familia Nova. The new family, now officially recognized by the International Astronomical Union through a special educational initiative that had captivated the global scientific community. The formal recognition certificate, framed in silver and dark wood, hung proudly in Noah's room, right next to the original, crumpled crayon drawing that had started their entire cosmic journey years ago. "You know what else is really special about tonight?" Noah asked, his eyes twinkling brightly, reflecting the distant starlight, holding a secret that made him almost vibrate with suppressed excitement. "What's that, buddy?" Graham asked, his voice low and warm, wrapping his arm around Era's shoulder. "I'm going to be a big brother soon, right?" Era gasped softly, a sound that held shock, joy, and utter disbelief, her hand moving instinctively, protectively to her stomach. They hadn't told anyone yet. The wonderful, terrifying news was barely a week old, still a fragile secret known only to them. "How did you?" she started, unable to finish the thought. Noah grinned, a triumphantly smug, 8-year-old smile. "You've been drinking ginger tea instead of your super strong coffee, just like my friend Ashley's mom did right before she had her little brother." And Dad's been extra, super careful about you lifting things at home, even my favorite heavy astronaut textbook. Plus, he added with impeccable, unassailable logic. Our constellation has room for exactly one more star. Graham threw his head back and laughed, a deep, joyful sound that echoed faintly off the dome, pulling both Noah and Era into a tight, enveloping hug. You really don't miss anything, do you, kiddo? Nope. Noah looked up past the telescope at the sweeping expanse of the night sky, his gaze settling on a particularly brilliant planet. I think it's a girl. Then she can be like one of the smaller, newly discovered moons of Jupiter, maybe not Io or Europa, but just as important as the big ones, but in her own special way. Through the observatory's open dome, Jupiter shone massive, bright, and perfectly steady. Its eternal, churning great red spot was a powerful reminder that some of the universe's most beautiful, enduring things come directly from chaos. Just like their family had emerged, rebuilt and resilient, from the turbulent storms of the past, stronger, more deeply connected, and immeasurably more beautiful than before. To infinity, Noah asked, starting their familiar, beloved phrase, lifting his chin. And beyond, his parents responded together, their voices blending seamlessly under the vast, ancient canopy of stars. Because some endings aren't really endings at all. They are just new beginnings, full of potential and wonder. Some families grow exponentially stronger with each challenge they face, finding their bedrock in shared love and resilience. And some true love stories don't conclude with a simple happily ever after. They just keep expanding, forever evolving, much like the universe itself, infinite in their boundless capacity for joy, profound growth, and exhilarating discovery. Up in the deep night sky, the stars of Familia Nova twinkled brightly, marking the illuminated path home for a family that had found its way not just back to each other, but to a love as vast and endless as space itself. Have you ever lived a love story that took you all the way around the sun, and through 6 long years of separation, to finally find your true destiny? Just like Graham and Era, who had to wait for the innocent, compelling wisdom of a child to rediscover and affirm that some loves are truly, permanently written in the stars. Do you believe that there are loves that never truly die? They just patiently wait for the exact right moment to rekindle, burning bright once more, just like the constellations that always return to the very same point in the cyclical sky. Your participation in this channel is very important to us and helps us keep telling these stories. Please leave your opinion, reflections, or your own love story in the comments section below. Thank you sincerely for watching. If you enjoyed this journey and the story of the Whitaker family, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what part resonated with you the most. Your feedback and support mean a profound lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting and emotionally resonant stories from the heart of the stars.